We're holding chapter 4. We explained in chapter 3 that B'Yud Nivra Elam Haba, that the world to come is created with the Yud, means that there's the pleasure, the pleasantness of God, the pleasure of God, which is rooted in God's essence, that becomes revealed and manifest in the world to come. So that's what it means that B'Yud Nivra Elam Haba, that in Elam Haba we benefit from accessing the Yud, meaning the pleasure that's embedded in the Yud. The Yud we said earlier, in chapter 2, the beginning of chapter 3, that the Yud represents Tzimtzum, God making himself smaller, moving himself out of the way, as it were, to create space for creation. So in chapter 4, the Rebbe goes on to explain first of all, the mechanics of it. What does this mean? Why is it necessary to have a tzimtzum through which we can then access the pleasure? And how does that tzimtzum, how does that contraction work? So let's jump into chapter 4. In the beginning, before creation, God's infinite light, the Eirin Seif, the infinite light, filled the entire empty space. The empty space meaning is a reference to what would eventually become the empty space. So at first there was no empty space. It was just God's infinite light everywhere. And there's no space, there's no room for any creation. Since God's light was infinite, there's no room for anything independent within that. It's all infinite. Even though in God, in this infinite light, there's already the capacity for limitation, for finiteness, from which the creation is possible. Nevertheless, since it was then embedded in the Eirin Seif, in the infinite light, it wasn't apparent, it didn't stand out. So for that reason, it was necessary for there to be a tzimtzum, a contraction. And what kind of a contraction? A siluk, a removal of light, an absence, which through that there would be space for creation. The Rebbe is going to explain this a little bit more as we move on here in this chapter. But what he's saying here is like this. Everything is already included before creation, before tzimtzum. Before God creates anything, the capacity, that potential for anything is possible, is there, it's present. So how do you say that in order for there to be a world, he needs to create a space, he needs to have a separate action? What do you mean? That God could create a world, so he can create a world even as he is infinite. The problem is that in infinity, even to remove himself? Right, so in other words, even though there's the capacity to create, nevertheless, that capacity is not apparent, because when things are when there's infinite light, there is no practical sense, even though the potential is there, but it's not apparent, it's not revealed. So in order for that capacity to be able to create something finite, for that capacity to be brought to the fore, you need to be able to remove or separate the infinite from the finite, even though at first they're all together in one. Okay, first he brings an example from a Rav and Talmud. When a teacher wants to teach a student who's not at all on his level, completely beneath his level of intellect. So obviously, any teacher, a brilliant teacher, has a student that's an average student, let's say. So the wisdom that the average student can understand from the teacher is certainly already there in the teacher's mind. It's not that it's not there, it's already included in whatever the teacher knows. That intellect, that knowledge, that information that is accessible or appropriate for the student is certainly there, but it's completely overwhelmed and hidden. It's concealed within the teacher's own much greater and broader, deeper wisdom. This smaller, condensed version or simplified version of whatever the teacher is thinking to himself is there, but it's hidden, it's not apparent. So for this reason, the teacher needs to sort of clear out his clear his mind completely from what he's thinking. And it's only after that it's possible for the teacher to then go ahead and start teaching the student something that he's able to understand. Furthermore, even after the teacher clears his mind, so to speak, of his own understanding of any of the topic that he wants to teach, so he's got to remove it, he's got to clear it out of his mind. Then he can access or reveal the limited, condensed, simplified, watered down version that he's going to teach the student. Even so, it's still the way the teacher understands what it is that he's going to teach the student. And so therefore, even once he's accessed and revealed this intellect as it's fitting for the student to consume, the teacher then needs to start factoring in the capacity of the student to be able to understand it. It's only after he can assess the capacity and the talents and abilities of the student, it's only after he can assess the student's capacities as it is within the student that he can then go about teaching and imparting this wisdom to the student in a way that the student should be able to understand it and comprehend it. So, just as when you have with a student and a teacher, that the intellect, it's not that the teacher knows a given topic, he knows it obviously very well, very thoroughly, very profoundly, very deep and in a very advanced way. So obviously the simplified, watered down version of it that the student will eventually be able to understand is obviously already there in the teacher's mind. It's just that when the teacher is thinking of this topic fully as he understands it, that simplified, condensed version of it is not apparent. So the first thing he needs to do is he needs to clear his mind from that initial, the way he understands it. Once he does that, he can realize or access the simplified, the shorter, simple version for the student. But even then, it's the way he sees that simplified version. After that, he needs to then assess the capacity of the student to be able to comprehend, and then tailor what it is that he's already found within his own wisdom that relates to the student, then tailor that to the student and teach it to the student. So how does this relate to what we're talking about as far as tzimtzum and creation? So if the Gemara say l'mayla b'yisavos kol metzius v'kol seder shtalshlus, this can be understood applying back to creation. Sheklol says yisavos yal yidei shem havaya. Creation comes primarily from the name Havaya, right? Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the name of God that we call in Chassidus, the term we use is Havaya. And the word Havaya comes from, which means sort of creation, also comes from the term Al-Shem, Hoya, Hoiva, V'yiyah. Was, is, and will be. Meaning past, present, and future are all one. So you see already a connection between the name Havaya. You see God as creator, as being both transcendent of creation, being removed from creation, but also being creator. So here too, when creation, we say, comes through the name Havaya, what does this mean? That Yesh B'zeh Haseder Dedal Eis Shem Havaya, it follows the order of these 4 letters of God's name, the Yud and the Hey, and then the Vav and the Hey. Beginning with the tzimtzum, with the first contraction that's alluded to in the letter Yud, right, which is small. We said the Yud represents condensing, making yourself smaller. Siluk, tzimtzum. Till the space of till it comes into the domain of the recipient of the creation, which is alluded to in the last Hey. How does this work? First, there has to be a tzimtzum, a contraction. And what kind of a contraction? A siluk, meaning a removal, an absence of light. Through that becomes apparent the outer part, the external light. In other words, you have light, the Eir Ein Sof. We said first there is only the Eir Ein Sof, the infinite light. The infinite light has 2 layers to it. There's the inner part of the infinite light, and there's the external part of the infinite light. The inner part of the infinite light is infinite. The external part is the potential for limitations, the limited light. So first there has to be a removal, an absence, a tzimtzum. So through that, the external part of the light can then be revealed, which is Hainu Eira Mugbal, the limited light. Which allows space for creation. This finite light, or the finite capacity, was not apparent earlier when the infinite light filled all space. Even though it too is only light, it's only light and not essence. Nevertheless, since it is as it is without any filters, without any contraction, it's similar to the essence. It's infinite. It says in Kabbalah that God is obviously perfect. He has he can do anything. And so therefore, just as we say that God is infinite, we have to say that He's also finite, or has the capacity to be infinite. He also has the capacity to be finite. Because if we were to say that God is only infinite, we were to limit Him to infinity. So God Himself is both finite and infinite. The thing is that the finite aspect of God, the finite aspect of the light, which is like the essence, so is also infinite. There's an infinite capacity for finiteness. And when it's within the infinite light, it's not apparent. You don't see finite. You can't see finite within infinite. So what has to happen is there has to be a separation between these two capacities, between the two potentials. God has a potential for everything, but as He stands as potential for everything, you don't see the potential for the limitation. Obviously it's there. If you were to say that it's not there, that would be to limit Him to infinity. So obviously it's there. The problem is it's not apparent. For it to be apparent, for the finite light to emerge, you need to have a separation between the inner part of the light, the outer part of the light, the external and the internal, the finite and the infinite. Right? So even though He has that capacity for being finite, nevertheless, in the face of the infinite light, it's not apparent, it's not recognized, it's not seen. So for this purpose, it was necessary to have a first tzimtzum, this first contraction, which, as we said, is called siluk, a removal. This separation, this removal of light, not a limiting of light, because a limiting of light, again, won't change anything. The light before the tzimtzum remains. Light before the tzimtzum, everything is mixed together, and in such a situation you can't identify the infinite light. So what has to happen is there has to be a separation. That's the first tzimtzum, is siluk, is a removal. A removal of what? Of the inner light, meaning the infinite light, and through that what is revealed is the finite capacity, the finite potential. And in addition to just revealing the finite light, then the finite light has the capacity to now create. So meaning that the tzimtzum, this first tzimtzum, the tzimtzum arishin, the tzimtzum that's b'derech siluk, of removal, has two steps to it, two components to it. Inyan Aleph, the first part is she'oir hagvul nivdol me'oir habli gvul v'nikar b'fnei atzmai. The first thing is that the light, the potential for being finite, for limited light, is now apparent and revealed because it's separated from the infinite light. But furthermore, so we said before that even within, when it's all together, so the finite light is A, not apparent, but B, it's also infinite. The capacity for finite is infinite. So the second part is, once it's separated, once it's revealed, then it also is limited and becomes capable of being finite and
Does it in itself become limited, or the fact of what it reveals becomes limited?
That's a good question. It itself is infinite, obviously, as we said before, but the tzimtzum affects it that it could limit itself, so it could become limited, meaning it could restrict where it goes, which gives space for something. It doesn't overwhelm what it's creating. So the effect of the tzimtzum is that it shouldn't have this overwhelming force of light, but it should be limited. This is only possible in the light. Since it's light and it's not essence, it has these two things. A, that it could be separated and revealed as something separate, as its own separate force, and B, that it could be limited. Right? Meaning these two things, that the separation between the inner part of the light and the outer dimension, and then the contraction, this idea of tzimtzum altogether is only something that's possible by light and not by essence. The essence of God is not subject to tzimtzum, to limitation. So before creation, you have the Eirin Seif Mamala Makam Acholol, you have the infinite light. Again, we're not talking about the essence, but we're talking about the infinite light. The infinite light, there's potential, since it's like the essence, which has the potential for everything. Shleimus of the Koila, as we said, he can do anything. So there's both the potential for infinity and the potential for finiteness. And then the tzimtzum causes impacts the light, this infinite light, in that A, it separates one aspect of the light from the other. So now you can reveal the finite light. And also that the finite light should become limited and capable of creating something finite. What does this introduction have to do with what we're talking about? We've been talking about... You shaking your head no to me, or... We've been talking about the fact that through creation and through our work in this world, we access the Noyam Hashem. We said, Acha Shalti Meis Hashem, Oisa Avakesh, right? We want, what do we want? Lachsois b'noyam Hashem. We want to see the pleasantness. And we said, what's the pleasantness? That's the essence of God. And we said that through the neshama coming down to this world, through that we have biyud nivra olam haba, that in olam haba, meaning which is the result, the reward for all our effort in this world, we access the yud. What's included in the yud? That limited point, that contraction, that tzimtzum. In that we access the pnimius, right, the essence of God. So how do we get there? So we're saying that first we have to explain what the mechanics are, right? There's first the tzimtzum, which we said represented by the letter yud of the yud kei vav kei. And the tzimtzum, the point of the tzimtzum is to be able to reveal the limited light, the finite light. Through revealing the finite light, A, it becomes revealed, and B, it becomes limited so that we can have creation. But how does that relate to talking about accessing the essence of God, the essence of God? Again, we're saying here at the end, we're stressing that this tzimtzum is only in the light. It's not in the essence. God's essence is not subject to a tzimtzum. It's only in the light. So how do we get from, how is it this tzimtzum leads us to that essence? So let's continue. So the second paragraph in chapter 4. So too comes is the case when we're talking about creation of the world and all worlds, all of creation. Before the tzimtzum and that infinite light, before the tzimtzum, the first thing that happened, why would there be a tzimtzum? What's the why? What set this all in motion? Is that first there was a desire that God had for creation. This desire to create also has the idea of pleasure. You desire something that you find pleasurable, or there's the pleasure that leads to desire. The pasuk says, that his thighs are pillars of marble. So what is Sheikh of Amudei Sheish? So the Medrash explains, Sheikh the thighs, what is Sheikh means? This refers to the world, which God desired to create. Why is the world referred to as the thighs? Because the word for the thighs, sheikh or sheikh, has the same root as the word nishteikekus, which means a yearning, a desire. And that's why it refers to the world, because God desired this world. God desired to create our world. So in Tainug, this idea that he desired to create the world, not that he just did it because he was bored one day, but he desired means that there's a pleasure within creation. So before this contraction, before the tzimtzum, this pleasure is very intense. You can't create from that great pleasure that was there from before, as we said before. So for that it was necessary for there to be a tzimtzum where he removes his great light. So that causes that the light itself, even in the external part of the light that was there before the tzimtzum, where there too there's this pleasure, this desire in creation, the pleasure, the noyam that's already there in that light. There too there's the light. But what does it cause? That it should get in line. It should start structuring itself in the form of just a point. From that essence of the desire and pleasure in creation, without this great intensity that was there before the tzimtzum. And this is generally referred to in Chassidus as the Reishim or the Reshimu. This is the point. So, what is the idea of tzimtzum? So let's touch a little bit first. We'll work our way around this whole topic here. We're not going to get into, again, the idea of tzimtzum and tzimtzum not being kipshutei, because that's a little bit off the topic here. It's not like directly addressed. Its ramifications are here, but we're not. So let's not get into the fact that the tzimtzum is not a literal tzimtzum. But what happens? We're talking about God before there was no space for anything, and God makes a tzimtzum, and we're talking about the tzimtzum arishin, the first tzimtzum, which, as we said, is different than all the subsequent tzimtzumim, because the other ones are all about the limiting the light, and the first one's about removal of light. So the first tzimtzum is a separation. So what happened? God separates and removes that infinite light. The Pnimius Ha'or removes it from that space, creates an empty space. What remains in that space? What did we say? What becomes apparent is that by removing the infinite light, what's revealed is the finite light. Infinity can't be removed. If it's infinite, it can't be an empty space. So the fact that he can create an empty space, he can remove the infinite light, that itself reveals finite light. That reveals the Chassidus. So that's the residue, the Rishimu, the residue that's apparent after. So that's what it says. That the tzimtzum, first there's a tzimtzum, there's a contraction, a removal of light. What remains is a Rishimu, a residue. That residue is what we're talking about here, is the chitzonius, or the external part of the light, or the capacity for limitation. The capacity of the light to be limited. That remains. And then from there sprouts forth the light, the kav, which we're going to talk about soon. This kav, this laser beam, as it were, meaning a finely pointed and defined light that's no longer infinite, and that pours into creation. And that's Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. We'll get into it, and now everybody's going to clarify, we're going to explain it. So what happens? The first step is there has to be a point, just like we said before. Or let's go back to the metaphor of the teacher and the student. First, you have a teacher who's got his wisdom is very profound and it's overwhelming. And if you were to share it, as it were, with the student wouldn't get anything. So the first thing he has to do is he has to identify the limited, watered down level of understanding that the student is possible of grasping, right? Which is not apparent in his overwhelming understanding of the given topic. So the first thing he has to do, he has to remove himself from that topic. By doing that, he can access this limited understanding. But the next step is, before he can now teach this to the student, he needs to assess the student's level of comprehension. That's the hey. So you have Yud, which is the point, which is accessing that limited understanding. That's the Yud, because it's limited, it's finite. So that's represented by the Yud. Then comes the Hey, which is the way that, and that's within the teacher. It's the first Hey of Shem Havaya, the first Hey of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is as the teacher assesses the student's capabilities, which means already the student now takes up space within the teacher, right? And now he understands he assesses that student's capabilities. From that emerges the Vav, which is that the Yud now turns to the Vav. Now that the student has we assess the student's understanding, now there's a Vav. Now there's an actual teaching to the student, teaching of the student. That limited understanding. It's a Vav, it's limited. You're giving him the limited information that he can comprehend. And where does that go? It goes into the final Hey, which is already the space of creation. That already represents creation. What does he mention here? Sheikh of Amudei Sheish, the idea that God desires creation. What's the point? Is that when we understand, without that, you would think that once there's a siluk, once God reveals the finite light, and now he's going to teach that, so all you're getting is a limited understanding, limited information. But the truth is, just as it is with the student, the Gemara says that after 40 years, is koi minish adaita derabe. After 40 years, a student now can access the essence of his teacher's wisdom. Meaning for 40 years he can't. He's getting what the teacher's teaching. But after 40 years he matures and understands enough. His mind is developed enough that now he can get the essence of the teacher's understanding. It's koi minish adaita derabe. Meaning that even though the teacher was giving you a watered down, finite, limited version of what he understood, but within that is embedded the essence of his knowledge. If his essence of his knowledge is not embedded in there, there's no way you can ever access it. You're only limited to what it is that he gave you. But since the core essence of his wisdom is embedded in that finite aspect, so therefore you can acknowledge as well. So even though the yud represents contraction, represents a limitation, it's only what's apparent now that's coming into creation is only the external part of the light, the rishimu, the koyach hagvul. Nevertheless, in it before Tzimtzum already had the desire of creation within it, which comes from God's essence, and it too is there. It's just that it's hidden. It's limited. Yeah, and he's able to access it. In other words, that essence is there. And the truth is, every time a Yid learns Torah, the essence is there, because you're talking about the Chachma Devish. But that's Torah is already a little bit of a different. It's a little bit of a different topic over time. Yes, that you can comprehend, but within that finite amount is the whole essence. It was a limit. It wasn't Panai Loyero. It's limited, but it's only through the limited you can understand. Just the same thing. It's the teacher, a student. If you're not going to limit your information, the student's never going to learn. So that's the whole idea, that it's tzimtzum. The whole point of tzimtzum is to shine. That we think of tzimtzum as a limitation, as a concealment. So tzimtzum, as we said in chapter 2 from the Maggid, tzimtzum is a negative thing. It's lashon tsar. Vayihi is a lashon tsar. It's a concealment. But the truth is, it's the concealment that makes it possible for there to be a revelation afterwards. Without it, you can't have that. Okay, let's keep going. From this point, then emerges the kav shenirmas ba'izvav d'shem havaya. That's expressed in the vav of the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei Shemeir al Hamshach Lamata, which represents a drawing down Lamata. Ela shelifnei zat tzarich liyos. We don't go. The name Hashem's name is not Yud and then a Vav. It's a Yud and then a Hey and then a Vav. Right. So even though after we have the point, the Tzimtzum, you have the Nakuda, then you come to the Vav, but there's a Hey beforehand, as we mentioned before. What's the Hey? Shen Yona Hashar is Klei Makabel Kameishu Ba Mashpia Atzmei Adayin Shlachem Nikapam B'Shem Shetach Da'ak. There, it's the assessment of the student's capacities as it's the teacher assessing it. After that, you have the final. Afterwards, you have the final hay, which represents in Chassidus. We're talking about the world of Atzilus, which represents already the space of creation. Want to stop here? Should we keep going? We have 5 minutes. Okay. This all is as far as the orderly fashion of creation. That the desire and pleasure in creation is all embedded in the Yud. Nukuda Bavada, point, Nukudas HaReshim, as we said, the Reshim, the Rishimu, right, as we mentioned, where it's the limited light. This, even though now within Seder Shtashus, within the orderly creation, everything had to be concealed in order for there to be creation. And so that the pleasure that God has, the essence of God is hidden within the Yud. Nevertheless, the ultimate purpose is that from this should become Olam Haba. Through a Yid's fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs, that Bereshis, the whole purpose of creation is, right, Bereshis is Beis Reishis, two beginnings, the Yidden that are called Reishis and Torah is Reishis. So the whole purpose of creation is so the Yidden should fulfill Torah and mitzvahs. So through our fulfillment of the purpose of creation, through that we cause that the Yud now builds Olam Haba, which is the reward for our Torah and Avodah, Torah and Mitzvahs. So what we cause through our Avodah is that this pleasure that's concealed within the Yud now becomes revealed. In the greatest capacity possible. This is what it means, that because of Olam Haba, there was a Yerida, a descent down to this world. The ultimate revelation of the Noam Havaya, the pleasure of Havaya, is greater, higher than where the Neshama was before it came down. So this finishes explaining the idea that we said that there's a Yerida Tzarech Aliyah, that the Neshama comes down to this world for the purpose of reaching higher. What does that mean? That when the Neshama is higher, it doesn't access the essence of God. But it's only through the Neshama coming down to this world which is a yerida, it's a descent, because we're coming to a world of concealment, of limitation, where the essence of God is not fully manifest in an infinite way. But since the purpose of creation is for Yidden to come and be Mekayim Torah mitzvahs, that's where the essence of God's desire lies. And so when we come down to this world, what happens? We access that essence that's embedded in the Yud. And so the result of that, the schar for that is Olam Haba. Meaning that the essence, or the pleasure that God has from our Kiyum Torah mitzvahs, which is hidden before, becomes revealed. That's the idea of Olam Haba. That's what it means, that it's the Yerida, that's Tzarech Aliyah, you reach that higher level because you access the pleasure, which represents, again, where's that pleasure, the desire that God has in creation, that's in His essence. And how does it become revealed? As we mentioned, the analogy we gave last week for the difference between joy and pleasure, that pleasure is felt throughout the body, it's felt everywhere. And what is being felt? The essence, that experience, that's what you're experiencing. Let's just finish, let's try and squeeze out the end of chapter 4. V'zau inyan hayud k'moshe behu b'mashpia, shegam l'mayla yeshna inyan d'asir is garma k'v'yachol, shou inyan atzimtzum v'asiluk. Ad shaba b'nekudas ha'reishim, u'banachom kolo and yanim shereitzim litin l'matal l'makabel k'fi shaboim b'israchvos v'ispash v'yezes, shou inyan eilam haba noyim avai. So this completes this first part of the Maimer, the idea of the Yud, which is the Azir's Grama, and the Yud, which is the Tzimtzum, and the Yud, Nivra Elam Haba, meaning that you get to the pleasure that this Yud, this bittul, that God makes Himself small for us, He removes Himself from the space in order to make a place for us. In that concealment itself lies the pleasure of God's very essence. And therefore, through fulfilling Torah mitzvahs, which is the purpose for which He went through all of this, we access that pleasure that was there initially to begin with, which led to this whole process that followed. Yep.